Welcome everybody to Everyday Asphalt. My name is Jim Warren and glad to have you guys here today. The purpose of this program is to go a little bit deeper in the areas of materials, design, construction, and maintenance. Together today we've got Chuck Fuller in the house.
Hello, Jim.
We are going to be talking about a little bit of spring tune-up or spring, what's the word?
Spring tune-up.
Spring cleaning, spring tune-up.
Yep.
Etc., and getting everybody ready for a really busy season. So
Yeah.
glad to have you here.
Thank you for being here.
We just want to make sure everybody's up to speed. Remember, these are also posted on our YouTube site and also on the Audible or the Apple Podcast and Spotify as well, Audible series. And they're up there the next day. So glad to have everybody here. And man, it's supposed to be 90 degrees today.
Today's 90, yeah.
Wow. And a couple weeks ago was
Yeah.
in the 40s, and at night it's still getting cool.
Pay attention to the temperatures,
And
guys.
so that's a
you.
big deal that
Yeah.
we've got to keep up with. And right now, because we're in that transitional period, and we've also had some really bad weather
We
and
did.
fires. Fires in the area, and we've had a lot of damage up in the Panhandle this
Yep.
week.
Yep.
This past week or
From
so.
wind, yeah.
From the wind has just been horrendous.
Been brutal, yeah.
And
And I know that some guys have already started their nighttime paving operations. So,
Yeah.
we're kicking off. So,
Yeah, so we're right on the edge here, and let's make sure that everybody's tuned up and ready to rock on this thing. And let's get started.
all right,
Let's
do
get
it.
started. I forgot to start my clock. Okay, we want to make sure we're running around the right time today. All right, so we're gonna first start with design.
Design.
Okay, so we've got stuff that's hasn't come out yet. Designers are still working, and so this is for everybody. This is for TxDOT, for contractors, for consultants, etc., for everybody kind of in this business. And this kind of a mix mash of the different things that we've kind of talked about, things that we've run into over the last
Yep.
couple months.
Over the last couple of months, we've had a lot of conversation.
We're going to a lot of meetings, talking to a lot of people, and some of these things are kind of boiling up as being kind of
Things that we need to pay attention to.
Exactly.
Yeah, so most of the stuff that we're going to talk about are items that came up in our PIQ meetings. So when we're talking about
And
PIQ,
if you're not going to PIQs, go to PIQ.
yeah, partners in quality meetings. So we've started them. We've already had 6 or 7 of them.
Wow.
But you would be amazed on the same things that come up in each one of these meetings, and these are different districts.
Okay.
So this is throughout the state. So, we really just need to start paying attention. And I think what's happening is that we got into a wintertime lull. And and now we're back into the thick of things, and we turned around, and like you said, today's 90. Last week was in the 80s, but we've got some other stuff coming down the pike, in terms of temperatures.
Yes,
so
sir. Yes,
pay attention to all that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So let's get started with some design things that have come out of PIQs and some inquiries that we get here. And one of them is this whole thing about lift thicknesses, minimum thickness and stuff. And
Yep.
I think it's table 13, I believe, in most of the asphalt specs is the minimum lift thickness table per the mixed type.
right for the aggregate size.
For the aggregate size.
Right,
okay.
right.
So what we're trying to get is we're trying to make sure we've got at least 3 to 4 times the biggest size aggregate in that mix, so that mix has got a chance to get compacted and get into a nice tight dense mass, and so it works.
And we're not crushing aggregate.
And we're not
That's
crushing
even a-
aggregate. We get a permeability, we get long lasting pavements, etc. And when we get below that, then we start to run into problems. And we're trying to do some simulation work in the lab across the street, and
Yeah.
and they're found we did some work, and Josh and his guys over there did some work one day, and they're playing around with. It took over 200 gyrations, and our normal is 50.
50, right.
Okay, to get to the same level of density when you get really thin
Yeah.
on some of these B
Right,
mixes.
right.
You get less than the minimum.
Yep.
And so basically what we're doing is we're just beating the hell out of the rock.
That's right.
I can't even imagine what it looks like on the
On the
inside.
inside, yep.
So we got to make sure we do that. So make sure you're looking at that table and don't go under the minimum.
Yeah, and the other thing that you have to really pay attention to is your minimum core thickness also. Okay, so we have a minimum thickness that's out in the field, but we also have a minimum that we can even test for.
Right.
So when we start talking about minimums, anytime we use the word minimum, I just cringe because at best, we don't have an opportunity for success.
Right.
I mean, we might be successful, but it's going to be it's not be by design.
By
it's
luck.
by luck.
Well,
And so,
unless your table is
perfectly-
unless your road is smooth like this table, you're not going to get 1.5 inches everywhere.
That's
If that's what your desired thickness is, or 2 inches or whatever. You know, the areas that are high are going to get less, and the areas that are low are going to get more. And so, you know, part of it kind of depends on where that core ends up being taken.
absolutely.
But if you're really relying on a minimum of 1.5 inches,
Right.
well, you're gonna have to over yield your whole tonnage in order to get a minimum. And I think
That's
a lot of
exactly.
folks don't understand that concept. They think, you know, it's 110 pounds per square yard per inch, and it's 1.5 inches, so that's 165 pounds, and that's what I want. I'm not gonna pay 1 pound over that. And that's
Yep.
gonna give me 1.5 inches everywhere, and give me a Schedule 1 ride. It's not gonna happen.
Not going to happen.
So we got to understand that, and I think part of it is people just don't understand kind of 3D. You know, you think 2D on a plan, but you don't. You got to think 3D in the
Out of the
field.
building. And you got to think about. I mean, again, it's constructability. It's constructability. So
Yeah.
let's pay attention. And at this point, before we start, if we're going to be successful, what are we designing for? That's another thing. We talk about that all the time.
All the time.
One of the PIQ meetings that we had was, what are we designing for? Are we designing for structural strength? Are we designing for ride? Or what are we trying to accomplish? You know, and so
And there's different actions for different requirements, and
Absolutely,
it's not all one
absolutely.
size fit all,
yeah, yeah,
right? So, and one of the other ones we're doing a lot of work on in-house, and TxDOT is, and we've had a lot of conversations lately, is just, you know, we think the main line and the intersection, that's the same design.
yeah.
Realistically, it's not. You're slowing down. You got heavy shear loads, heavy static loads, hot vehicles sitting on the roadway. We see it on I-35 and all across the state. Those really need to be looked at differently, and we're finally, I think, starting to crack that mold a little bit to say, you know what,
Yep.
maybe we do need to look at these
We
differently.
need to look at them different. Yep.
And how far back do we go? Where does the intersection actually start?
Yeah.
Is it
how far
10
past
feet
the
from
queue?
the
Yeah.
bar, or is it, you know, 1,000 foot back?
Yeah.
So those are things that we're having to have an understanding on, because we're seeing in some areas more distress in the intersection than we are in the main line.
Yep.
And you've already talked about, you know, sometimes how we construct intersections.
Yeah. We get to the intersection and we just stop the traffic.
Green
and
light, go.
and pave through it, and we're not going to test it. We're not going to take any cores there. Most of the time, we tack right in front of the paver, just
So it doesn't-
so it doesn't spread
So it does-
everywhere.
but
get all
then
over
it
the car.
doesn't break,
Doesn't
and then
break,
the trucks are
and
driving
you got
on it.
Cars driving on it,
And
so-
it's a mess.
And it's a mess. So, you know, a whole nother conversation about intersections has got to happen, and we started it.
Yeah.
That's what's really great is that not only within TxAPA but within the construction industry and with TxDOT, we're having the conversation that we really need to look at that. We need to look at intersections
Yeah,
and pay more attention
And
to
the,
them.
and the districts, I mean, the districts are having to maintain these.
Yep.
But now they're starting to go, you know what, we need to have this conversation.
Yep.
Of what are we gonna do within this period of this length of the roadway that is gonna be exhibiting or gonna undergo, can't talk
Yep.
today, is gonna take all this stress. We've gotta look at it differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And give us an opportunity for success. I mean, we have
Yeah.
different material selection type. We have different
Yep.
materials
Yep.
that can go into that intersection that are going to be successful. That's the thing, is identify those now, talk about them now, be prepared. Let's talk
Yeah.
about our pre-paves now
Yes,
on how we're going to build
absolutely.
these things,
Absolutely.
how we're going to do them.
Absolutely.
And then something else that's been coming up quite a bit is not only intersection work, but the overlaying of concrete pavements.
Okay.
So that's another thing. Let's think about when we're designing for overlaying concrete pavements, how we're going to achieve, you know, the smoothest possible ride
Yep.
on a concrete pavement and make it stick all at the same time.
You gotta make it stick.
You got to make it stick. So we've had a lot of conversations about it, and we've got some ideas, and we're working through. We got
Yep.
materials and tests
Yep.
working with us.
Yep.
We got Travis Patton and his crew, and Prabhat Karki and his crew working with us on the different opportunities for success.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
You know, and it's got to start in design. It's got to be in design. But once it's out in the field and we start the construction, it's too late.
It's
So
like, let's go.
let's
We
go.
gotta-
So
We gotta think it through.
Let's talk about it now.
We gotta think it through.
Yep.
one of the other things that you brought up and you've seen in a couple situations is sometimes the choosing of the layers of the roadway, we're ending up with a lot of binder
In 1 square foot.
in 1 square foot. Under seals and bonding courses and
Tack.
thin layers and tack, and you add all that up, and it's a lot. It's half a gallon to 3/4 of a gallon per square yard in some cases.
Yeah.
And we got to be careful that, particularly if we're going to put that in an intersection now,
Or in a bus.
or in a bus stop, you
Yeah.
know, and those kinds of things. We've got to be thinking through this, and we want to help. I mean, if we can help, give us a holler. But we want to make sure. Again, you've mentioned it 2 or 3 times. We want to have an opportunity for success. And I think if someone brings up to you, says, we think this might be too much liquid in this square foot,
Yeah.
well, let's have the conversation. Don't just say, bid it as you see it, or well, that's what the design says. Maybe, I make mistakes every day.
Right.
I don't know if you do. But,
No.
but and some of it is just I haven't learned what that impact is of what that decision that I'm making
That's
is.
right.
And we just got to be able to say, hey, okay, I've learned, and we don't want to go out and create a problem. And I think the last thing, if a contractor sees something and the answer is, well, that's the way it was designed, go build it. But if
Yep.
the contractor goes, this is not going to work, guys,
We need to think through
y'all
this.
need to have that discussion.
Absolutely.
And mixed selections, thin layers versus thicker layers, that kind of stuff. You mentioned, you got a 3-inch mill.
Yeah, there's a project that had a 3-inch mill out and an 1.5 inch. It's a 3-inch mill out and a 3-inch pave back.
So 1.5 inches.
Inch and a half, inch and a half.
Okay,
And
people would go.
people
okay.
would say that's doable.
If the surface is like this.
If the surface is perfect, it's a minimum. That's my minimum thickness on type D. It's
Right.
is an 1.5 inches.
So I meet all the requirements.
I meet all the requirements.
Right.
It's supposed to work, but but
Sometimes.
you got to really pay attention. I mean, for me, it would be. I would rather have a 1-inch level up on the bottom. Make sure that I get this smooth.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and I'm going to sacrifice my testing there because
Right.
I can't
Can't
test it.
test it less than that, yeah.
But then I can come back and put a 2-inch on top.
A nice, good,
2-inch on top.
yeah, okay.
And we're talking about minimums, but the minimum on a super pave is 1.25 inches.
Right.
So
On
I mean,
a D.
on a D.
Right.
So I mean, think about that. That's another opportunity there for success.
Okay.
I want to get the smoothest riding, possible.
Sure.
And smooth pavements,
They last
long-lasting
longer.
pavements,
Yep.
they last longer.
They last longer.
And again, it has to be done during design, or we have a conversation about it before we get out there on the war room.
Yeah.
So,
Binders.
oh yeah, we got a whole bunch of binders now
Right.
available.
And I think, again, it goes back to your thing about opportunities for success. We can, obviously, you got different PG grades for different applications. We can bump the opportunity to bump binders where we need to, okay, to get the strength from the binder in the mix as well, both in rutting and cracking resistance. But we can go too far if we say, okay, well, I only need this much,
Right.
and I'm going to bump this and have a one ton of
Yeah.
a 7622. I
Yeah.
mean, from a contractor's
It
perspective,
doesn't work that way.
what do we need for?
So, I mean, I'm thinking when we're talking about different mixes coming out of the asphalt plant, I mean, I like to see 200 tons. I mean,
Okay.
that's going to be, because it takes a little bit for those asphalt plants to transition
Right.
through. And if you're talking about doing 20 tons of this or 50 tons of that, the chances or the opportunity for success are just, if you are successful, it's going to be out of luck and it's not going to be out of design.
And this is 200 tons of one run, not
Of one run.
quantity that's going to be interspersed in 4 different directions on an intersection.
Absolutely.
So again, it's understanding how the plant works and all that sort of stuff, and we'd be glad to work with anybody to help y'all understand that a little bit better. But when he's running mix, again, if we back up enough to run through that lane through the intersection,
Yep.
we're gonna run it. We're gonna use some mix, but again, matching that minimum quantity to to what we're actually being able to produce is I think is a real key thing. One of the things you've brought up a couple times is just consolidation of bid quantities.
Yes, bid codes. My goodness, man, I look at all the bid codes throughout the state of Texas, and you throw in cities and counties, and I mean, you got a lot of bid items, different mixes. Let's consolidate those. I mean, we have material that works. We know that we have material that works.
Okay.
Let's utilize those
Sure.
materials that work.
Because in it like a B or a C or a D, they all have lift thicknesses and they overlap each other to some degree. So, maybe I can use a little bit thicker D where I have a little bit of C.
Yep.
Or vice versa.
versa.
Around there. So, but I think and then when we're going to get into materials next, but that has a big ramification on just mixed designs and everything else. So. And again, I want to, we've been doing a lot over the last couple of years, about last year or so, on the whole ride quality stuff. And Glenn used to talk about opportunities to improve the ride, and you've got to be able to build those things by looking at what's underneath and figuring that out. So level up, pavement repair, spot level up, spot milling, those kinds of things. If you're doing design, one, we'd encourage you to go get on the roadway, go drive that roadway.
Yep.
And I know it's a lift, in some situations to go do that, but nothing beats putting your hands on it and put your feet on it and your tires on it and going,
This is what we have.
Okay. And we've got some old everyday asphalt. I think February from last year, I think we did one, and we just went out and rode the roads.
Yep.
And we did one last summer.
Yep.
And we're just going out looking at the roads, saying, okay, this is what you should probably do here. Here's your opportunities. If those things aren't even, if they're not in the bid, then they're not going to be used.
That's
But
correct.
if they're in there, you can use them or not.
Yeah.
And even you can move some stuff around sometimes, but you got to have that ability. If you want to improve the ride to get more performance, get longer life, that sort of stuff, that stuff's got to be in there. So,
Absolutely.
what else? What else on design?
So I think we covered quite a bit. I mean, materials is going to come into play now.
Yeah.
So I
So
mean,
let's jump in there.
Let's get into the materials because again, spring tune-up. Get
Yeah.
ready because not only do we have a new specification for TxDOT, but we also have a new specification for cities and counties.
Yep.
And so a
Yep.
lot of cities have adopted the 341M.
Yep.
And
Available on our website.
Available on
Yep.
our website, and of course TxDOT now has their 2024 book out.
Yep.
And so, my goodness, I mean, there's not been a lot of changes, but there's been enough changes to where you could stub your toe.
And you need to pay attention.
You need to pay attention. So let's
So
get into it. Let's
so
get
that-
into
That's
our.
number one.
Yep.
And then we've still got carryover from last year and maybe in some cases from the previous couple of years. So
Yep.
it's not going to be uncommon. There could be 2 or 3 of the same super pave
Items.
specs out there,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then all the different items within that. So this is communication
Wow.
central.
Yeah. The very first question you got to ask is what
What
spec?
spec?
What spec are we on?
Which version
What
of what's
version of what spec?
And I think that's fine, but I mean, and it absolutely is fine, but it's not meant to be joking, but it's meant to be truthful
Yep.
because, like you said, we don't want to stub our toe on what we're doing or what this spec says and what that spec says. So, so again, check your backlog, check what you've got on the books right now, and is everybody on the same page? And one of the things that is an annual requirement now are these correction factors. Doing that, so stay up with them. You should have a list, hopefully, of all your mixed designs and when all your correction factors
From your
are
backlog.
due.
Yep.
And it's still March, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still probably going to get a couple
Couple
cool
more.
rains and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, if you got one coming up in April and you got some downtime now, man, just go ahead and get the thing knocked out.
Yep.
Contact DOT, get all that stuff sorted out, but let's go ahead and get up there because we want to make sure we got, current correction factors on our mix design, so everything's good from that perspective. But again, we want to manage our time properly. And we don't want to be, if all of a sudden the sun comes out and it's going to be sunny till August, and we got to do 30 correction factors, it's going to be a problem.
It's going to be an issue.
So
Yep.
let's stay up on it. Let's communicate. Let's talk about it. Mix design changes.
Right.
Okay. Again, stuff's happened over the winter, maybe some materials have changed or something like that, and you go to start up and whoa, we got a problem. We may end up having to switch binders, or we may end up having to switch rock. What happens when we switch a binder?
So when you switch a binder, all you have to do is make sure that you pass the Hamburgs for that requirement, for that binder.
Okay.
And it's specific to the supplier,
Okay.
right? Your AC supplier.
Gotcha.
So if you're dealing with several AC suppliers on the same mix design, and you're not changing the aggregate, you're just changing the AC supplier, all you have to do is just pass the Hamburg requirement. So I'm suggesting if you have several AC suppliers, let's do it now.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and run the Hamburgs on your current mix designs that are approved now with the different AC suppliers. Make sure you pass all the Hamburg, so when something does happen, you can just slide it across and say,
I've already done it.
We've already done it. We've
Awesome.
already got it done.
I like that idea.
So
But if we change rock,
we change rock, we got to have a whole brand new
Even one
mix.
source.
One source,
One
even if
source.
it's just the sand or what have you. You
Yeah.
need a whole brand new mix design, which means you're going to have a whole brand new trial batch. And I'm a firm,
let's talk about trial batches.
trial batches. I'm a proponent of taking the trial batches and training your crews around the plant.
Okay.
You know, training and reestablishing your crews around the plant. You're in a trial batch, have your paver there, have your rollers there, have your guys
Just
there.
like we're going to do it real time.
Just like we're going to do it real time.
Use the word we previously a scrimmage.
We're going to do a scrimmage
So
right
we're
here.
we're gonna play like we practice,
And yeah,
and we're gonna go out there and we're gonna practice with this just like it was on I-10 or
Yeah.
or 45 or I-20.
and once we
And-
learn how to do that, it's what you say, every ton, every day, the same
way, Tunde way.
That's right. Make sure your head of material's correct. Make sure your screed's set up correct. Make sure your cross slope, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Make sure all that stuff is correct with a trial batch.
Yeah,
Out there,
That's your SOP, right?
that's it. That's it.
So
Your
when
standard.
we go to
operating.
pave, we've got. We were talking about this last week with a group we were working with. We talked about when you come to the line,
Yep.
everybody knows what their job is and everybody knows what to do. We're not going to come up and go, "Hey, I forgot my pads.
Yeah.
Does anybody see my spikes?"
Yeah.
We know, and we've got all the equipment set up, and when we hit that transverse joint, we're ready to rock.
There you go.
And so I think that's a good analogy, and I think that's something we're going to keep pressing on. Talk to your suppliers.
Yep.
Just talk to your suppliers. They ought to be on speed dial, right?
Yep.
And just say, hey, this is what we've got. We've got so much carryover from last year. This is what we're looking at this year. We got this new job that's going to spin up here, and that's going to take a big demand. Do you see any other demands that are going to impact us
Right.
this year? So we need to be able to be. Maybe we need to look at some other material
That's right.
just to cover ourselves, because the last thing you want to go is like, hey, I'm ordered for next month. He goes, oh, by the way,
I'm on allocations.
you're on allocation.
So there is some,
and that's happened.
No, yeah, there's some talk about allocations and stuff. So what we want to do is just verify your backlog, verify your percentages, verify your aggregate supply, verify your AC supply.
Got it.
Just verify all that stuff as you're going through and you're checking your designs and making sure they're up to date.
Good.
So that's the other thing. Again, checking the designs, make sure they're up to date. And something else with the designs, with the new specifications, we have hyperlinked test procedures. We're going to talk about test procedures.
Yeah, all the 24 books. And
Yeah.
I think even some of the last ones did, but we had it in our
341M2.
341 spec. Every test procedure in there is hyperlinked, and so all you gotta do is click. Unless you've got the book, then it doesn't hyperlink. But if you got the electronic version,
Get the electronic
you
version.
click it. It'll take you to the most current version of the test procedure that TxDOT has. And how many test procedures has TxDOT updated in the last 8 or 9 months?
Yeah.
They're going all of them.
All of them are going to be updated.
And so it may be little things. Sometimes it's little things. Sometimes there's some pretty significant things. We just want to make sure there's no surprises. Everybody's
Yep.
up to speed. And so, it's the same thing with design and construction and everything else. Hey, let's read the spec. Read our notes. Read everything. Make sure we understand what's going on, so we
Yeah.
don't end up having a problem or an embarrassment to say, hey, well, it's got to be this way. And someone goes, well, did you look at the spec? And you go, ooh,
Yeah.
geez, it's got to be that way,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. So, it's a little saving grace for everybody. A lot of lab equipment. We'll talk about plants here in a second, but lab equipment's got to be calibrated. Needs to be. You need to need to be
Certified.
maintained. Some of it needs to be certified. Maintenance, need to be full of maintenance on that. One thing over the last couple of years, we've gone to that extra lab at the plant.
Yeah, separate labs.
And who's taking care of that equipment? Who's maintaining that equipment? Who's keeping up with the calibrations? Who's measuring molds? Who's measuring pressures? You know, we got to make sure that when, you know, the whole idea of having another lab at these plants is so we can compare numbers. But if one's maintained and one's not, you're not going to be able to compare numbers, and it's going to be a cluster.
Yep.
And
yep.
so let's have that discussion. You know, let's have that discussion as well. Stockpiles.
Yeah, that's a big one, you know, because I don't know if we pay enough attention to the stockpiles, you know.
I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either, but we should.
We should.
you
We
know.
should be pulling stockpile samples,
Yeah,
okay, and stockpile checks out of our virgin aggregate and our wrap
Wrap.
stockpiles
Yeah.
at a reasonable frequency.
right.
It's not specified, but just from a process control standpoint, just to make sure that we know what's going into the plant, because we'll know what's coming out of the plant because we're going to test the
Test,
material. But then we go back, okay, now what do we change?
Yeah,
And it's like, well, we think the gradation is this, but it actually moved that. I make a move, I may be going the wrong way.
Yeah,
And so you only know what your if you know your output, you know your input, you know what to fix in between.
Right.
And so we would just encourage everybody, the contractors, know what's in your piles. Test it at a given frequency. We're working with TxDOT right now, and TxDOT's working on a quality control, process control program for RAP.
Yep.
Probably will come out this year at some
Yeah.
point. But let's go ahead and get started. You know, run a gradation, run asphalt content, run a rice
Moisture.
gravity, moisture content, and just start tracking it.
Yep.
Because at some point, you're going to need to know what's in there.
Yep.
And we're going to need to be able to adjust based on that. And it's hard to adjust based on no data,
Right.
right? It's like, well, I think if I do that, it'll help me. If I was making the change, if I had data that said, you do that, you're going in the right direction rather than going the wrong direction.
Control charts. I mean,
Control charts.
they're so important, especially if the footprint of your plant is smaller.
Oh,
And
gosh.
you're bringing in more material
All the time. Yeah.
every day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's happening.
Yep.
And you got to know what's coming in. You got to maintain that knowledge of your stockpile. And
'Cause
control
rock-
charts are the best, easiest way to do it. They're very simple to develop and very easy to maintain, to tell you the truth. And that's also another way you can train if your new guys are at the plant, new 1Bs, or maybe somebody who's training to become
1A,
a 1A.
1A, yep.
Training to become a 1A, this is an opportunity for them to get knowledge on how to pull a sample, how to you know, shake a sample, you know, how to
split a sample.
how to split a sample, how to, you know, all that stuff will come into play. In other words, train as you go.
Got it.
So
Got it. Check your thermometers, etc. And we've had this discussion a couple weeks ago with TxDOT about just splitting. Okay.
Yeah.
Build yourself a proper splitting sample.
Yep.
A splitting table. Okay.
Yep.
That's big enough where you can dump your sample out.
Yep.
You can mix it up and you can get a proper sample out of that.
Instead of a little bitty old
Instead of a
pan.
little bitty, cake pan,
Yeah.
do it big enough and make sure you can do that and all that. Anything else on that?
No, again, just please pay attention to test procedures and what specification we're under. I mean, that's
Gotcha.
going to be the
That's a
the
big
number one thing.
Got it. Plants. Give your plant a proper tune-up. Okay, you're going to run that thing all summer, and some of you guys haven't stopped, but make sure you're. We did a workshop here a month or so ago now, and just went through all kinds of stuff about things to look at, frequencies, testing, evaluations, etc. But the one thing that you talk a lot about safety, but and it should fall in any of these areas is. Let's do a safety check.
Safety check, yeah. Check your fire extinguishers. Make sure that you have your SOP, your standard operating procedure, for lockout tagout. Make sure you have it for confined space. Make sure you know what a confined space area is.
Sure.
You know, if you have coal feeds and your coal feeds are blocked off, that's a confined space. So you got to pay attention. You got to know what your confined spaces are. You don't know until something happens,
Something
right?
bad happens.
Something bad happens.
And that's something really bad can happen.
And that's something really bad.
Yeah.
But you're going to be getting in and out of that drum. Are you going to be lifting the drum up? Are you going to be, getting it prepared for the season? Man, have a standard operating procedure for your lockout tagout. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want anything to happen at that point.
Guards on belts,
Guards on belts,
man lifts, harnesses, all that sort of stuff. When you use them, when you don't, and just go that. And you've mentioned this a couple of times about, and I've noticed this when I have my dresser at home, right? Where I take my pen out and that kind of stuff. And over about a week or so, it starts to accumulate. And I don't really even notice it. But I noticed it last night. I go, man, I need to clean this thing
clean
out.
it up. Yep.
But you look at something the same way every day, you kind of start to miss stuff. So I think in your old job, you used to do what?
So our plant managers would go inspect the other guy's plant.
Okay.
So I had three plant managers or three plant operators, managers, and they would go and inspect each other's plants.
To get a set of fresh eyes.
And we'd have a checklist. We'd have a checklist of what to look. Checking for fire extinguisher, checking for your
all the stuff.
The stuff we just talked about, and even check for your permitting. Because by law we have a permit requirement that we have to maintain a log when we have a rain event. We have to maintain a log of when we have a discharge. All that stuff's got to be properly vetted. And so these plant managers would go to each other's plants and just have a round robin. Okay. And we would say, this is what we need to work on. We need to work on this item or this item. And
even just good housekeeping stuff.
Good housekeeping stuff.
What's in that bucket?
Yeah.
Because that could be an issue.
And you'd be surprised on what they find. You'd be surprised. You look at the same fire extinguisher and you don't use it, for a whole year. Well, it needs to be.
It's covered in dust and you can't see the dial.
You gotta check all that stuff out. But this is the time to do all that right now. Yep. This is the time to make sure that you're up.
Check your spare parts inventory. If you're a contractor. You know what breaks. You know what's gonna. You know what lead time is on stuff. And if you're needing your plant on a big job and something breaks and you need a motor and you don't have a spare motor or gearbox or whatever that is, if you're running all the same equipment, well, maybe you can have a centralized hub that can get stuff to your different plants in a couple hours. But if you're ordering something and some of this stuff is not cheap. Some of this stuff is pretty expensive. But how much lost opportunity cost? What's your opportunity cost for being down for 2 or 3 days?
That's right.
In mid-season. So, you mentioned checklists. Build out daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually checklists. Yep. That's what we did with the workshop we'll do, and we'll do some more stuff with that later on. Have a stockpile gradation strategy. Okay, I'm checking my stockpile gradations like we just talked about, and then if it hits this point, if it hits the old statistical process control, you had warning limits and action limits, and if it hits these tolerances, you need to be doing something.
Yeah, that's that green, yellow, red light. Huh?
There you go, green, yellow, red light in there. And we've talked about communication a dozen times already, but people have changed, right?
That's
and
right.
if you've got a group text, a group chat thing set up for a particular job, and 3 of those 8 people have changed,
yep.
We probably need to update that and make sure everything's up to speed, and we're good to go. We're good to go there as well.
Include everybody. Include your ground guys, your plant operators, your loader operators. That's really important. Is to have everybody.
There may be several group chats.
Yep.
But obviously, you're right. The grounds guy is just as important as anybody else at that plant, and they are the eyes and ears. They're going to hear something. As T.J. Young would always say, that things cry before they die.
They cry before they die.
Like my steering pump.
Yeah.
But they can say, hey, this is or when I check my temperatures.
Yep.
Okay. We've talked about that, giving those guys temperature guns and having them document what they're doing, going around checking bearings, checking motors, writing that stuff down, grease points, etc. hey, this one's not taking any, it doesn't take grease for 3 days.
Yeah.
We
got an
probably
issue.
got a problem,
Yeah.
you know, and then I put a gun on it, and all of a sudden the temperature's up here. This thing's fixing to blow up.
Yeah.
We need to do something. So
And check and again. We're talking about checking with the thermal gun or your thermal cameras.
Yeah.
You know, everybody probably crews probably have them, but
Yeah.
check your baghouse. You can find leaks with your
Sure.
baghouse with that camera,
Yep.
and you can seal up all the leaks. Of course, I mean that's just going to make you more efficient. There at the
or
asphalt
just
plant.
look for the dust.
And look for the dust.
Look for the dust in the air. Check your release supply, or whatever release agent you're using, not diesel. You know, check the handling procedures, check the dilution rates, because a lot of that stuff comes concentrated.
Yep.
You want to dilute it down. Make sure all that stuff's working. Check a lot of folks are running these auto spray systems
Right,
now, and
right.
let's make sure it's spraying properly and there isn't something that got hit or bent or something like that in the process. Sometimes routes change.
Yep.
You know, since last year we're adding new roads. There's roads under construction now. Check your route maps, et cetera, for your truck drivers in the process. Trucking.
Oh,
Whoa, okay.
Make sure.
Make sure. Lift cylinders, no leaks. Okay. Lights, brakes, backup alarms, tarps.
Tarps a big
Tarp's
deal.
a big one. Make
Yeah.
sure the tarps seal. They're working properly. And again, you go back to your team meetings.
Yep. And again, we have a lot of information that's available. TJ have left us the checklist.
Some stuff,
Yeah. So if anybody needs anything like that, just give us a holler and we'll make it available. But again, the checklist and writing it down is so imperative. Instead of just coming back, I'm the ground guy, come back and say, hey, everything's fine, everything looks good, boss. You know, ready to go.
And you might have missed something.
You might have missed something. Write it down. Have your standard operating procedure in writing, to where you know that you walk through the whole thing.
And you go back and there's a box missing and you
That's
go,
correct.
This is a deal. This is a deal. Again, safety, rework goals for the year, backlog, forecast, all that sort of stuff. Anything else on plants?
I think we covered that pretty good on the plants. It's just that we are definitely. I want to make sure everybody's all on the same page. Include everybody. I can't stress that enough. Is that the inclusion of everybody involved?
Construction,
All right.
safety, number one.
Safety.
Let's get everybody back. Let's make sure everybody's got their PPE and the PPE's in the proper order and everything's going. We just regurgitate time and time again. Keep an eye out for each other.
Absolutely.
In the process.
I like to talk a little bit about the crews out there on the job site.
Yeah.
We change job sites all the time, almost daily.
Yeah.
And so task somebody on the crew.
Oh, okay.
Task somebody on the crew to know exactly where they're at, either through a GPS or through a street or an address, exactly where they're at, and then also task that same person with knowing the closest emergency room. So that person is tasked to knowing where they're at, physically know where they're at, and then know where the closest
It
emergency
could
room is
be a
at.
roller operator, it could be the tack truck driver, it could be the loot guy.
Could be the loot guy. And then change that person out. Once a week, change that person out,
Okay.
but involve that whole crew.
Yeah.
It's a safety meeting, right? Or a safety share. It's not a safety,
Dialogue. Or
yeah.
a monologue.
We want to make sure that everybody is aware, but I can't stress enough, if something does happen, you panic happens and you
Right.
become,
You'll freeze.
You'll freeze.
Right.
And
Some people could freeze.
So I want to tell you, when you call 911, you get the defibrillator.
Yeah, just like when we do the safety stuff here.
That's
It's like
right.
everybody's got a role, and you're defining
That
role.
role.
You're predefining that, and so it's a big opportunity. So,
Yeah.
Chuck, this is your week, and then tomorrow I'm gonna say, Chuck, where are we?
Yeah.
He goes,
absolutely.
I'm right here.
Yep.
Okay, good.
So we
All
looked
right.
at a subdivision just not too long ago, brand new subdivision, didn't have any street signs.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're out in the middle of of a field.
Yeah.
We're something.
And there's
happened.
no streets.
There's no streets. What happens?
Yeah,
with
what would be
something?
the closest access point
Yep,
to that subdivision so emergency services could even get there?
that's correct.
That's a really good thought.
So anyway, that's my safety share.
Okay.
All right.
Critical spare, again, tune up on equipment, the MTV, the brooms, tack truck, pavers, rollers. If you're running an old paint truck, whatever, anything that you've got out there needs to be maintained up to speed, good to go. Critical spares. I saw something today from Asphalt Pro. Kudos to those folks. they're saying, hey, have an extra heating element for your screen.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's a
But
good
man,
point.
if you're paving at night now in cool weather, you're going to have your dang heater on, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden your heater
Element.
goes out and you're laying thin mix.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a good night.
No.
So, those are critical things as well. Tack trucks, spray pavers, again, systems, lines, pumps, hydraulics, nozzles, all that sort of stuff.
Nozzles are very
Spare
important.
sets of nozzles. I saw that on one job one time last year. This guy had a bucket of a whole set of spare nozzles in case, and he had one that was clogged, and reached into his bucket and screwed it on, and there was no harm, no foul. I mean,
Yeah.
it's up and running.
That's your roller also. Your roller
Oh,
spray
yeah.
bars,
Yeah.
those get clogged up.
Pads, scrapers, the scrape bars. I saw one on a job, a real high-profile job. It's a very expensive roller, but the scraper, that long scraper that was
Yeah.
across the drum, was bent up at one end.
Yep.
And guess what? Guess where the mix was picking up?
Yeah, right
On
there.
that one end.
Yep.
And they're trying to bang it down and it's like, that should have been the responsibility of the operator before he even got on that piece of equipment, to do that walk around and make sure I am good to go.
Right.
Everything is good to go in that process. So, we've talked about our suppliers. Okay, now we're talking about, we've got a lot of different kinds of tack.
Yes.
We've got bonding courses, tack courses, trackless tack materials, etc.
Yes.
Seal coat materials. Talk to your suppliers to see if there's any issues, or has anything changed? Has your formulation changed? Is there different handling
Yep.
procedures now this year versus last year?
If you have tack in your tack rig or in your tank, and
Is
didn't
it
get-
still in there
is
from
it
last
still in
year?
there from
Let's
last
get
year?
it cleaned out.
or what have you. But also, just let everybody know there is new technology and new materials that are out there. I mean, we haven't even
All the time.
We haven't even approved some of these new materials. They're in the process of being
Yep.
approved. But there's new technology, new thought processes. So let's pay attention and check with your suppliers. Your suppliers are going to be able to answer those questions.
Yep. Building out your SOP like we talked about earlier. Again, come up to the line, we're ready to go. Check your screed plate for wear. Check your end gates. Are they bent? Check augers, wear plates, cross ties. Build up of mix that gets inside the screed on that pivot point can cause a mess.
Absolutely.
Because you think it's adjusting and it's not. Electronics, connections, wires.
Yep.
Stuff gets frayed. Stuff gets missing.
Yep.
And check your ski. Do you have all your parts for all the skis that you're running and that kind of stuff, or maintain and make sure your 10-foot straight edge is still straight.
Make sure you still have it.
Make you still have it. If you don't, go get another one. Again, the rollers, the water system probably needs to be flushed out. Not a bad idea. And strainers, spare nozzles, have all that stuff, ready to go in case there's an issue.
And when you talk about checking your end gates, I mean, I've seen it many times on the paver itself, that the end gates had either hit a manhole or hit a valve,
they get
and
bowed
they
out.
get bowed out a little bit, and you can't make a good joint when it's like that. You have to have that either replaced, repaired, new, what have you, and make sure your springs are working. Make sure there's no asphalt in the spring. So many times it's
Little
just
stuff, yeah.
it's little stuff like that really makes a difference, and we need to pay attention every day on that. And again, a standard operating procedure needs to be put into place.
Yep.
Again, who's responsible
Yep.
in construction? Who's responsible for quality?
Everybody.
We all are.
Everybody.
So if I'm the roller guy and I feel a bump, guess who's going to feel the bump? The traveling public is going to
I'm
feel
gonna feel the bump.
So everybody's responsible. Can't stress enough. Everybody needs to get together and debrief every shift, before the shift, at the end of the shift, on what we did right and what we can improve tomorrow.
Super important.
Super important
Super
to have
important.
that. And again, it boils down to communication.
It's 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes. And let's just, hey guys, did anybody feel a bump?
Yeah.
We're all good.
And but then when you do your toolbox or safety brief in the morning, say, okay, remember, we saw this yesterday. Let's not do this today. We're going to keep a particular eye on this issue, and follow through with this stuff.
And sometimes we're dealt cards of constructability. Sometimes you're going to have
just a tough
manholes,
job.
ADAs. It's just a tough job with a lot of handwork and but it's okay to do a lot of handwork.
Yeah.
Keep your roller in tight.
Yeah.
Keep your joint straight.
Amen.
You know, I mean,
Amen.
even if you're dealt the cards of a
Make the
bad
best.
job,
Make the best
make
of
the best
a
of it.
bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, and we all have them. We all
You're
been
doing a
there.
lot of hand work. I mean, and that aggregate's floating on top. The bones, pull the
Pull the
bones
bones.
out before you roll it in. It's
Yeah.
going to make the best of a bad situation. Make it look as good as it can
Absolutely.
in those areas, etc. We've got a paving checklist on our website. We'll put a link in there up on there, and there's a lot of good stuff in there that you can use. You can even use it kind of as it's a web-based thing, but if you know how to save a URL
Yep.
on your phone,
You
it'll
can put it
actually
on
be
your
like
phone.
a little app for you. That's what I've done. So,
Mhm.
Inspection. We got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so inspection is so important. Everybody's got to realize or be aware of what spec we're using. Inspectors. I
Yeah.
mean, we got to make sure that we're
We
all
got
on the same page.
the new 24 book. We got
Yeah.
the old special specifications, and then
Yeah.
you've got the old version of the numbered specs that go back 10, 12 years.
Yep.
I guess there's probably a couple of those still
Oh,
around.
there's still some out there. Absolutely.
So we want to make sure we're using the right one. We talked about in the spec, it's got references to the current test procedures.
Right.
So again, you want to update on that. Make sure you're using the most current test procedures in the process.
Right.
And just reviewing roles and responsibilities. You got new people moving in, moving out. Hey, who's going to check this? Who's going to do that? Who's going to look after this? When am I going to get my quantities? When am I sharing my reporting? Again, that's all spelled out in the specification.
Right.
But sometimes that
Then
people
get
don't
carried-
want to read through all that.
And then get carried
It
over.
doesn't get carried over. So again, this is just a great opportunity to kind of go back to that and relook at it one more time. Just like we talked about at the plant, update phone numbers. We got new people in here. If you're changing people out, make sure those people are somehow getting access to the information that's
Right,
being shared, which is a real key thing. You mentioned this earlier. We want to review the plans. We want to review our quantities. We want to look at our plan notes. We
Our
want to
general
look for
notes.
maybe something that's like, well, this says this here and that there.
Which one is it?
Yeah, which one are we going to use? And let's escalate it to the proper person who can make the call,
Right.
and then let everybody know that, hey, when this comes up, this is the action that we're gonna do. The testing frequencies, that's from pretty much standardization, and carryover jobs.
Yeah. And it's there in the spec. I mean, again, we really need to know what spec we're under and be able to read that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that you need to be, whether you're city or county or what have you, and you're dealing with this inspection, come get certified. Again, certification, the TxDOT approved programs over here at the Texas.
TxHMAC.org.
There you go.
There you go.
And we also have training available.
Yep.
We have training available at the center. We have certification at the center. And I can't stress enough that, for you to be able to do your job, you really should come and be certified and get trained and educated of what we're dealing with. Because, again, we're all here for one reason, and that is to safely do quality work.
Yeah,
That's the whole
we want to
purpose.
build long-lasting, more durable asphalt pavements, and if the person getting the sample doesn't know how to sample, or the
Yep.
person doing the testing doesn't know how to do the test, some of the old data says that was 2/3 of the test result right there, and we're really trying to see what the kind of air voids are in the mix, and
Right.
who knows what we've got. So that aspect of it, I think, is a real key component.
Again, we're here to do safety, and we're here to do quality, and that's to me that's the whole reason that tax app. That's the whole reason why you do these. That's the whole reason why we do every day. It's the reason why we're here as an association is to safely build roads that are going to have durable, long-lasting life.
Good deal.
So
What else?
I think we covered quite a bit.
It's been, we're right about the time frame. If you guys are still here. But we appreciate it. We appreciate it. So, brother, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I'm
Always a
glad that we
pleasure.
had the
I'm glad
conversation.
Glad we're in one room at the same time.
Yep.
To do that, remember that these programs are published on our YouTube site and are also converted to audio, and they will be on Spotify and Apple Podcast for your driving and listening pleasure. we'll see you next month, and we'll have hopefully we'll have a grand announcement next month. We got some really cool stuff happening here.
Yeah,
We're
it
just
really is.
waiting to get the final paperwork on it, and it'll be a pretty cool deal. So a lot of changes coming up around here, hopefully very soon. And we appreciate you hanging in there today, and be safe. Ever forward, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Everyday Asphalt.